Delta Force. Most people have heard the name. Few actually know what it means. Delta Force is the U.S. Army's most secretive counterterrorism unit, built for the kind of missions that governments publicly deny ever happened. Colonel Charlie Beckwith created it in 1977. He had trained with Britain's SAS. He came back to America convinced the U.S. needed its own version. Something small, ruthless, and completely off the public radar. They don't wear uniforms with unit patches. They grow out their hair and beards. Walking past a Delta operator in a grocery store, you'd probably assume he was some guy who works in it or maybe teaches yoga. And that is entirely by design. Their work covers hostage rescues, targeted raids, and direct counterterrorism operations at the highest possible level. The Pentagon spent years neither confirming nor denying their existence. Even today, most of what this unit has done lives permanently in classified folders that the general public will never see. Getting into Delta is its own nightmare. The selection process alone breaks most people. Candidates spend weeks navigating brutal terrain, hauling extreme weight, operating on almost no sleep, and facing psychological pressure specifically engineered to make them voluntarily walk away. And the majority do exactly that. The ones who stay and pass become something rare. They've operated in Mogadishu, across Iraq, and in dozens of other locations that never made a single news headline. Delta Force doesn't want credit. Staying invisible is part of how they stay effective. SEAL Team 6. The name itself is built on a lie. It was never the 6th team. When the unit was founded in 1980, only 2 SEAL teams existed, and the commander named it 6 purely to make Soviet intelligence believe the US had far more teams than it actually did, a bluff so effective the name simply never changed. Officially, it's called the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Most people still call it SEAL Team 6. It operates as the Navy's equivalent to Delta Force, handling the most dangerous, most sensitive missions the US government authorizes anywhere on the planet. Their most famous moment came on May 2, 2011. A team of operators flew into Pakistan at night without warning. They entered a compound, completed their mission, and were already back in the air before most of the world had any idea anything had happened at all. And that entire operation took less than 40 minutes on the ground. These operators specialize in what's called maritime counterterrorism. That includes boarding hostile ships at sea in the dark, swimming into enemy harbors undetected, and deploying across the world on almost zero notice to handle situations that conventional military units simply aren't built for. Navy SEALs. SEALs are probably the most recognized special operations brand in existence. There are books, movies, documentaries, and a remarkable number of podcasts dedicated to them. But beneath all the fame is a training program that most human beings couldn't survive even if they wanted to. SEAL stands for Sea, Air, and Land. That's not a creative nickname. These operators genuinely train to fight in all 3 environments and move between them like none of it requires any extra thought. The road to becoming a SEAL runs through BUD/S, which stands for Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training. It lasts 6 months. The dropout rate typically sits somewhere between 75 and 80%. Which means out of every group that starts, roughly 3 out of 4 people quit or get removed before it ends. The worst part has its own name. Hell Week is 5.5 continuous days of physical and mental punishment built around one goal: finding out who will quit when their body is screaming at them to stop. Students run through freezing ocean surf, carry heavy rubber boats above their heads for miles, stay soaking wet for days straight, and do all of this while surviving on less than 4 hours of total sleep across the entire week. And that's just the beginning of the process. There's still months more training after that before anyone earns the right to call themselves a SEAL. Once qualified, SEALs operate across counterterrorism missions, reconnaissance, direct action raids, and classified operations spread across nearly every corner of the globe where U.S. interests are at stake. The Ranger Regiment. Rangers are defined by one specific ability. They can go from a phone call to a locked and loaded force kicking down a door anywhere on Earth within 18 hours. That's not a recruiting poster line. It is a literal, built-in operational requirement that shapes how the entire regiment trains and lives. 3 active duty battalions operate on a constant rotating alert cycle. Someone in this regiment is always packed, always ready, and always waiting for a mission that could come at any hour of any day without warning. Ranger School is a 62-day course that exists separately from actually being a ranger in the regiment, and it's worth understanding the difference. The school strips soldiers down to their physical and mental limits through sleep deprivation and near-starvation caloric intake, then demands that they continue to lead effectively despite all of it. And soldiers from all branches of the military attend it, just to earn the tab. The actual regiment takes things even further. Every Ranger in the 75th goes through a separate selection process on top of whatever prior training they've completed. These are professional raiders. They've mastered airborne operations, urban warfare, and direct action with a level of repetition that makes the hardest things look effortless. Because by the time they do those things in combat, they've already done them hundreds of times in training. Green Berets. Green Berets operate differently from almost everything else on this list. Where other units are built to strike fast and leave, Green Berets are built for patience. And patience in warfare is one of the most powerful and underrated tools that exists. Their official title is U.S. Army Special Forces. President John F. Kennedy personally authorized the Green Beret they wear back in 1961, calling it a symbol of excellence. Their primary mission isn't always direct combat. More often it's going into a foreign country, embedding with local fighters or resistance groups, learning their language, earning their trust, training them, equipping them, and then working alongside them to dismantle a threat that would have been impossible to handle alone, turning one small team into a force multiplier that can effectively generate hundreds of capable fighters when the job is done right. Each team is called an ODA, or Operational Detachment Alpha, made up of 12 people, 2 officers and 10 non-commissioned officers, each with a specialty in weapons, engineering, medicine, communications, or operations. But everyone cross-trains, meaning the team medic can handle a firefight, and the weapons expert can treat a wound in the field if the situation calls for it. Language training is mandatory. You cannot build real trust with a community through a translator, and Green Berets understand that winning the population is often what determines whether a war is actually won in the end. Marine Raiders. The Marine Corps already had a reputation for producing tough, aggressive fighters. Then it decided to take its most competitive Marines and build something even harder. MARSOC, the Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, was officially activated in 2006, making it one of the newer special operations units. But newer doesn't mean softer. The Raiders take their name seriously. Their heritage connects directly to the original Marine Raider battalions of World War II, who carried out some of the most aggressive and dangerous amphibious raids in the entire Pacific theater, at a time when the outcome of the war was still very much uncertain. Modern Raider teams are 15-man elements called MSOTs, Marine Special Operations Teams, structured and trained in ways that closely mirror Army Special Forces. They conduct direct action raids, special reconnaissance, counterterrorism operations, and train partner forces in some of the most difficult environments the world has to offer. Their selection and individual training course has a high washout rate. The people who complete it come out the other side as proof that elite can always be made more elite if the standard is high enough, and the commitment to maintaining it never drops. Pararescuemen PJs. There is a specific kind of person who hears that someone is trapped in an active combat zone, injured and unable to move, and responds by immediately preparing to jump out of an aircraft and go get them. That person is a pararescueman, and the Air Force has a small, carefully selected group of them. PJs, short for pararescuemen, exist for one core mission: finding and recovering military personnel who are isolated, injured, or captured in hostile territory and bringing them home alive. Their motto is simple: that others may live. No unit in the military lives closer to the literal meaning of its motto than these operators. The training pipeline takes roughly 2 years to complete and covers more ground than almost any other military specialty in existence. By the time a candidate earns the right to wear the maroon beret, they are a certified paramedic, a qualified combat diver, a trained parachutist, and a capable small unit operator who can defend both themselves and their patients in the middle of a firefight, if that's what the situation demands. PJs deploy with Special Operations Task Forces and fly combat search and rescue missions alongside the Night Stalkers and other aviation units. They've operated in every major U.S. conflict since Vietnam. Night Stalkers, 160th UR. Every elite unit on this list needs a way to get where it's going. The Night Stalkers are that way. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment exists specifically to fly Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, and other Tier 1 units to the places that don't make the news. At night, at extremely low altitude, through weather that would ground almost any other aviation unit in the world. The regiment was created out of failure. A 1980 attempt to rescue American hostages held in Iran collapsed when helicopters collided in the desert, and the military came away from that disaster with a clear understanding that standard aviation units weren't equipped to support special operations at the level those missions required. The Night Stalkers were the answer built from that painful lesson. Their helicopters, modified Black Hawks, Chinooks, and small little birds, are loaded with advanced avionics, terrain-following radar, and weapon systems that turn them into precision instruments as much as they are aircraft. Night Stalker pilots train for thousands of hours before they're cleared for actual missions, flying with night vision goggles at speeds and altitudes that would make most professional pilots deeply uncomfortable. The raid that killed Osama bin Laden used Night Stalker helicopters. The Battle of Mogadishu involved Night Stalker crews, PSYOP. Winning a fight without ever firing a weapon is by almost any measure better than winning a fight. PSYOP soldiers, officially now called Military Information Support Operations Specialists, are the people inside the U.S. military whose job is to make that outcome possible by changing how an enemy thinks before the shooting ever starts. These soldiers study target audiences, understand what motivates specific populations, and then design and deploy carefully crafted messages through leaflets, radio broadcasts, loudspeakers, and digital content, tailored to shift beliefs and behavior in ways that support the military's strategic goals. During the Gulf War, PSYOP units distributed hundreds of millions of leaflets over Iraqi military positions, carrying messages designed to convince soldiers that surrendering was both safe and rational. And it worked, with enormous numbers of Iraqi troops laying down their weapons without a fight. The ability to achieve a military objective without a battle is not a soft capability. It is a strategic force multiplier that saves lives on both sides and reduces the cost of war in ways that conventional weapons simply cannot. Civil affairs. Battles end. The mess they leave behind does not clean itself up. Civil affairs soldiers are the ones who step into the wreckage of a conflict zone and begin the complicated, dangerous, and genuinely critical work of putting civilian life back together before resentment turns yesterday's bystanders into tomorrow's fighters. Their job sits at the intersection of military operations and civilian reality. They work alongside special forces and ranger units to restore local governance, bring back essential services, identify community leaders worth working with, and prevent the population from becoming an active threat to the mission. The strategic importance of this work is difficult to overstate. History is full of military campaigns that won every individual battle and still lost the larger war because the civilian population turned hostile. And civil affairs soldiers exist specifically to interrupt that cycle before it starts. They are builders as much as they are soldiers, working in still dangerous environments alongside NGOs, host nation governments, and local communities to construct something stable out of something broken. JTACs. Few jobs in all of special operations carry a higher concentration of pressure in a smaller package than the JTAC. Joint Terminal Attack Controllers are the operators embedded with ground forces who communicate with fighter jets, bombers, and armed drones flying overhead, then calculate coordinates, clear the airspace, and issue the authorization to release weapons, often while actively taking fire, often while moving, and always under a time constraint that leaves no room for hesitation. The margin for error in this job is effectively zero. A mistake in target coordinates means a bomb hits the wrong location, which can mean civilians, friendly forces, or both. The weight of that reality doesn't ease with experience. It just becomes something these operators learn to carry without letting it slow them down. Combat controllers and special tactics officers in the Air Force go through one of the most demanding training pipelines in any branch of the military to earn JTAC certification. The Intelligence Support Activity, often called simply the Activity, is one of the most secretive units in the United States military. Formed in the early 1980s, it was created after failed operations revealed a critical weakness: poor intelligence. The solution was a unit dedicated to gathering accurate, real-time information before missions even begin. Unlike combat units, ESA does not carry out raids or direct assaults. Its role is to collect human intelligence and signals intelligence in high-risk environments. Members often operate undercover, blending into civilian settings without visible weapons or support. Their mission is to locate targets, confirm their presence, map surroundings, and identify threats, ensuring that when elite forces act, they do so with precision. ESA personnel are usually selected from experienced special operations forces, meaning they are already highly trained before joining. Even within the military, their presence is rarely known. In essence, ESA works in the shadows so others can succeed in the spotlight.